Peace be with you. I remember many years ago when I was a young man back in Ireland, and my best friend and I went to an event. It was some sort of gathering. It wasn't a party, but it was a gathering of some sort. And we were talking to another friend of mine, and my best friend had moved away, and he was questioning me about something that he and my friend and I had done, and I completely lied. I blamed my friend, my best friend, for what I had done that was wrong. And just as I was in the middle of the lie, my friend comes from behind me and looks at me. And I felt that immediate shame and overwhelmed me. And he just looked at me, never said anything in front of my other mutual friend. And then later he came to me, he just simply said, "I prefer when you tell the truth. I don't like it when you lie." And there was nothing else. And then just as he was walking away, he says, "And by the way, you're a really bad liar." And but I always remember his reaction because it was one of healing. It was one of forgiveness, one of a second chance. We stayed best friends until he was killed a couple of months later. But that moment changed me. That no matter what, it's always better to be a man of the truth. And that if you make mistakes, to tell the truth, to hold yourself accountable to that. Not always easy to tell the truth or be a person of the truth, because there is a certain amount of shame. But believe me, there's a greater shame that comes from a lie, when you don't tell and live the truth. And if your friend, I don't know if it's ever happened to you, you get caught in a lie. What the other person does in handling that lie or that untruth or that betrayal is an inflection point. It really is one of those points of defining moments in our lives. It can be one way or the other. If we're forgiven and granted mercy and a second chance, we can go a great direction. Another way, it can rupture or break a friendship completely. Today's gospel, Jesus has one of those defining moments with his disciples. Now, remember what's happened. Obviously, we've all know this story, right? But bear in mind what happened. Jesus had just died on the cross, brutally beaten, betrayed by these very same friends. All of them walked away. Peter denying him, his closest friend, denying him publicly. And he saw it. He gets beaten to the inches of his death, and he's crucified and humiliated, hung naked on a cross for all to see. Now he's risen from the dead. You can imagine how those same disciples, they hear that the women disciples said he's alive. They're terrified of the Jews and of him. Why? Because they know the shame has risen up in their hearts. They're completely afraid of what will he do? What will he? We know we abandon him. Jesus does not bring up any of that and simply says, "Peace be with you. When I forgive you, now you forgive others." Mercy. Defining moment for them. It had to happen twice for them for it to sink in. But for Thomas, once was enough. He saw him and he believed. Today we celebrate Divine Mercy Sunday. Sister Faustina, it was a great devotion of Pope John Paul II. And this Sunday was designated as Divine Mercy Sunday because the mercy that God shows through Christ to his closest apostles was meant to be a hallmark for every single disciple in the world. That we're called to come to believe in that same way. Pope Francis, who we celebrated this week in a very special way, his hallmark of his entire papacy was mercy. Mercy and hope and joy. But mercy was his motto, was that God is merciful to us. And that we are called to be a merciful church. A church that casts out a wide net and leaves the door open for all to come. He lived that day in and day out. He lived it to the last day of his papacy, that we are called to be a church of mercy. He used a beautiful metaphor, which you will remember he used, was that of a field hospital. We're called to not be a building like a museum, but to be a field hospital after the wounded come back from war, that we go out to them and we tend their wounds. He says, there's no point in asking somebody about their blood pressure and how much sugar do they take when they're dying with open wounds. We first need to tend to their open wounds. If there's anything that we could do as a church, is to build on that legacy, to open our doors to all, without judgment. That the doors and the Lord's arms are thrown open wide. It's up to you and I to bring that alive, to live that in our lives. So what does that come down to? It's exactly what Jesus tells his disciples. The Father gave to me forgiveness for you. Now you go and forgive one another. We're called to be bearers of God's mercy in the world. Now, how does that bear out for us in our own life? Well, I mean, we can have the doors open. We can have signs that say all are welcome, and we can tell you all you want to smile, all we want. But unless we are bearers of the mystery of that mercy, then it will all be empty. So it means for all of us that we are called, when that moment comes when somebody betrays us, when somebody says something difficult and wrong of us, that we don't have retaliation or retribution, but we start with mercy and forgiveness and love. Because that will convert them more than any retribution ever will. And that when somebody comes into our life that does not follow all our norms, that comes into our church, that we open our heart to them and welcome them, not to judge them whether they are married in divorce, whether they are immigrants, whether they are refugees, or whether they're part of the LGBTQ community. That is, we welcome and we offer mercy to all. And then when we live that out, and it's genuine from our heart, because why? Because God gives it to us through Christ. His mercy has first been given to us, and therefore we are obliged, commanded, to pass on the mercy to others. So today, my friends, we live this Divine Mercy Sunday in the long shadow of a great Pope who lived mercy in his own life and welcomed all into the church. May we follow in that example in offering mercy to all.